We are joined by Jeremy Bloom, the CEO of the X Games. Thanks for being here, Jeremy.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, X Games Aspen just wrapped up this past weekend. So, that's an event that started back in 2002. But, Jeremy, you never got a chance to compete at the X Games. But how was your first time overseeing the event?
I always wanted to compete in the X Games, but unfortunately, freestyle skiing, the sport that I did, wasn't part of it. But it was incredible, and the highlight certainly was the incredible things that our athletes did. There was a number of times that our athletes landed tricks that have never been landed before by anybody in human history. So those are the moments that really made X Games what X Games is today, and it was a beautiful thing to watch those athletes risk everything to put on a great show.
Yeah, I have a couple of young boys at home, and we flipped it on every now and again. And like some of the stuff you're talking about, like it was the first time my sons had seen Winter X, and they were just stunned by some of the tricks that were being pulled off. So totally agree there.
I love it. Thanks for bringing your boys to X Games. Look, we're on a mission to bring the casual fans back to X Games to see the incredible and spectacular things that these action sports athletes do. So, opening the aperture and welcoming new audiences is certainly part of the strategy.
Yeah, definitely two new fans in my house.
Good. Happy to hear it.
But Jeremy, ESPN this year has moved from majority owner to an investor in X Games, still the primary media partner, like we talked about, lots of windows on ABC and ESPN over this past weekend. But given that MSP Capital is now the majority owner, what has been ESPN's level of involvement in planning and execution around the event?
They're our linear partner, right? So you mentioned it. We're on ESPN and ABC, and we're grateful to them. They invented X Games, and now that the X Games is owned by private equity by MSP Capital, we got a big vision for where we want to take X Games. A lot of people don't realize that we're not owned by ESPN anymore, but it's important to note that MSP Capital owns McLaren F1. So they've seen a lot of value creation over the past 7 years, and the Constructor Cup, some of the team sport aspects. From F1. They also own the Phoenix Suns, a large part of it, and a bunch of pro soccer teams. So these are our leaders and investors in sports that have seen a lot across a wide swath of sports. And, I'm excited to execute their vision.
Own McLaren F1. I don't know what we need to do to see Zach Brown pulling off maybe some of these tricks on the slopes. See if you can convince him.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure to bring that up when I meet Zach. See what he says about doing a backflip on a snowboard.
So, one media change was having Roku come on as the official streaming partner in the US. So, X Games was on the Roku channel. What benefits did Roku bring here that differentiates it from the linear coverage?
Yeah, back in the day, it was perfectly fine to have 15 hours on ESPN and ABC, and everybody would sit in front of their TVs and watch it. But viewing behaviors has changed significantly over the past several years. Our audiences are consuming in lots of different ways, some on linear, some on streaming platforms, some on social media like Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and TikTok. So it's really our responsibility as a league and as an organization to bring our content, our athletes' content, and our events to them where they want to consume. And so streaming's a big part of that. And Roku has 90 million active subscribers. It's massive. They really are the front door to streaming. And so it was a great first time partnership. We're excited about the streaming side of the equation for our fans. And we look forward to building into the future together with Roku and our linear partners.
X Games has really been an incredible innovation lab over the years. We've seen it now with what the IOC has taken from the events to make both the Winter and Summer Olympics more modern, youth-friendly. But TV viewership has been a little softer for X Games in recent years. What is the next iteration for the event to keep those young fans tuned in?
Well, be careful what ratings you're looking at, because you're right, linear TV is dropping off, but it's sort of true for a lot of different leagues, a lot of different sports. If you look at global impression counts, so again, sort of being where people are consuming, whether it be on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, it hasn't dropped off a bit. In fact, we're up over 100% year over year from 2024 Aspen to 2025. And so I just think a lot of it's this new media paradigm where, especially, remember, a lot of young fans at X Games, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that don't even watch TV. Maybe they watch they're streaming, but they're always on their phone. And so we look at consumption across a lot of different mediums and not just linear numbers and not just streaming numbers. And so when you look at that, you think, gosh, the X Games brand is really dominant, continues to be the major dominant player, not just in action sports, but across a lot of different leagues. And we want to further invest in that because, again, we see it as our responsibility to bring the content to our fans, not the fans' responsibility to find us where we are. So a challenge for us as we build into the future.
All right, Jeremy, some quick hitters, and then we will get you out of here. So you were famously forced to choose between college football and pro skiing when you were at Colorado. How do you view this new NIL landscape?
Well, I'm grateful that these student athletes can monetize the skills that they work so hard to have, and a lot of them won't go pro. So if they can make a couple $1,000s in college, I think that's a great thing. Unfortunately, the NCAA didn't have a lot of plans in place that, if this were to happen, then what? And so I think we're seeing a bit of the wild, wild west. There's a lot that needs to be cleaned up. I think first and foremost, there needs to be a singular voice for college athletics, whether it's a commissioner, whether it's the leagues that take control. But it's clearly obvious the NCAA is completely void of the conversation. And so we're left with all these situations. Like the transfer rule is pretty ridiculous, right? The idea that a student athlete can basically go to a different school any time that they want because they had one bad meeting with the coach or got benched for a game. I just don't think that that's good for the sport. I don't think it's good for the athletes, and I don't think it's good for the administrators. So I think there's a lot of common sense things that need to happen, but I'm certainly happy that the student athletes finally own their own name, their own image, and their own likeness, which seems pretty basic and simple to me.
Jeremy, you played in Boulder. Deion Sanders has meant blank to Colorado football.
Everything from revenue for small businesses here in the community that skyrocket when the CU plays, to getting Travis Hunter, the number one recruit in the country, and bringing a Heisman Trophy here to Boulder, to getting us into the Big 12. If it weren't for Deion, we probably aren't in the Big 12 anymore. Colorado's probably not in the Big 12. Who knows what conference that they're in? So coming back to my original point, everything.
High praise. All right, some personal questions maybe. The best slopes you skied on as a professional?
I would go in the state of Colorado. I would say Telluride. I've had some pretty epic powder days on Telluride. Vail's great on a powder day, the back bowls and Aspen as well. Beyond that, I would go Zermatt, Switzerland. It's a pretty incredible place. Great skiing. Whistler is all time, incredible. But, the thing about skiing is that the best resort is the one that happens to have the most amount of powder that day. So you sort of have to follow the weather a bit to find the best skiing.
Jeremy, where do you see the X Games property in 5 years?
Mainstream. Bigger than just the endemics. I think I want to bring the casual fan back to X Games, and I think our athletes are so spectacular in what they do. I think there's a lot of ways to get to the casual fans. I want sport expansion. There's a lot of adjacent sports that make a lot of sense to bring to summer and winter X Games, new audiences to take a look at those sports and other activities, new sponsorships, new partnerships. So yeah, I think in 5 years we'll be a global action sports league that is more mainstream than just endemic.
All right, you were drafted by the Eagles in the 2006 draft, but are you pulling for the Birds in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks?
1,000%. Are you kidding me? I'm also a Broncos fan, so the Chiefs, they got to get knocked off their high horse. So 1,000% go Birds. A lot of respect for the quarterback over there in KC. There's no doubt Mahomes is amazing, but either way, I think it's going to be a fantastic Super Bowl. Can't wait.
Well, Jeremy Bloom, CEO of X Games, we really appreciate you joining the SBJ Sports Media Podcast this week.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us and telling our story.